Some choices take courage, but facing the consequences, that's a different kind of strength than most people never truly have. 17 years ago, Mark met a woman named Sarah and fell head over heels in love. She was younger than him, and when she confessed she had a 1-year-old daughter from a previous relationship, he hesitated. He wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. Friends warned him, "Single moms are just looking for someone to raise their kids," they'd say. But despite the doubts, love silenced the fear. He dove in heart first. What Mark found in Sarah wasn't someone looking for help. She was strong, independent, a woman working hard to support her daughter. She wasn't chasing a man to be a father. In fact, she never asked for anything. That's what pulled him in even deeper. Soon they were dating. A few months later, they moved in together. The same man who once feared fatherhood was now building a family, and not just any family, real one. Sarah's daughter, Emily, was still a baby when Mark stepped in. He had no experience with kids, but he did his best. School drop-offs, doctor visits, lunchboxes, Mark handled it all. He became dad, even without the title, and over time, he grew deeply attached to her. When Emily turned 6, Sarah got pregnant with Mark's child. It was official. They were a family of 4. Those were the best years of his life. Peaceful, fulfilling, normal. But after 16 years together, things began to shift. Mark started noticing the distance. The love that once burned so brightly now felt absent. The passion, the spark, it was gone. They were no longer husband and wife, just two people sharing a house, raising kids. There was no intimacy, no connection. It was sad, but it happens. People change. Love fades. Even so, ending it felt impossible. They had a house, a life, a teenage daughter and a young son. Divorce wasn't just a decision, it was a storm they didn't feel ready for. But then came the part that changed everything. The part that Mark still can't fully understand. As he emotionally drifted from Sarah, he found himself drawn to someone else. Someone he never should have looked at that way. He started falling in love with Emily, the girl he helped raise, the one he called his daughter. She was 17. Mark tried to fight it, deny it, tell himself he was imagining things. But the more he tried to ignore it, the more he realized he couldn't. The feelings were real, powerful, and terrifying. He started questioning his own motives. Was he staying with Sarah because of love, or because he couldn't bear to be away from Emily? The guilt was unbearable. He remembered holding her when she was a baby, helping her with homework, sitting in the bleachers at her soccer games. She had been his little girl, his family. How could he feel this way now? And yet, something had changed. Maybe it was how she looked at him. Maybe it was how she spoke to him now, bold, teasing, grown. Or maybe it was just his own mind betraying him. Whatever it was, he couldn't shake it. One morning, while driving her to work, Emily turned to him and said, "You know, Mark, you're not really my stepdad. You're just Mom's husband." It hit him like a slap, not because it was rude debut, because it was true, and because she said it with a kind of smile that lingered too long. A look in her eyes that didn't feel like a daughter talking to a father figure. Something about her tone, her posture, her presence, it was different now. She wasn't a child anymore. She made that clear. At home, she walked around freely, wearing little more than a t-shirt and underwear, treating their shared space like her own. She made comments that left him speechless. "I'm turning 18 soon. I'm a woman now. I don't need anyone telling me what to do." And in Mark's mind, the image of the little girl faded, replaced by the woman she had become, confident, bold, beautiful. And then came the moment he can't forget. Mark started waking up every morning with a knot in his chest. He'd drop Emily off at work like always, but now, every ride felt like a test of control, a test of guilt, and most terrifying, a test of desire. It was getting worse, and deep down he knew Emily saw it. She felt it. And worst of all, she wasn't running from it. She was leaning in. One afternoon, while they were home alone, she looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "Why don't you and Mom just end things already?" He froze. "What kind of question is that?" he replied. "Oh, come on," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear like it was no big deal. "There's nothing there anymore. You guys don't even talk. And Mark, you're still young. You're still attractive. You could actually be happy." He stared at her, stunned. Was this really happening? Was she flirting? Was he imagining it? Or had she just crossed a line no daughter figure should ever cross? Mark's heart pounded. He told himself to walk away, say something stern, set a boundary, but instead, he just stood there frozen in confusion, drowning in temptation. Emily's tone became bolder in the days that followed. Her jokes turned into suggestions. Her suggestions turned into invitations. It was like she knew exactly what she was doing, and she didn't care. And that scared him more than anything. He tried avoiding her. He tried distancing himself emotionally, physically, mentally, but it was useless. The moment he heard her footsteps in the hallway, the moment she walked into the kitchen in one of his oversized t-shirts, he was back in it. And then she turned 18. Legally an adult, no longer protected by the imaginary line Mark had clung to for months. And Emily knew it. She became more daring, more direct. Her playful games turned into straight-up challenges. She wasn't hiding anymore. One Saturday, with Mark's son spending the night at a friend's house and Sarah asleep in their bedroom, Emily walked into the living room, completely naked. Not a stitch of clothing, just her, standing there like it was the most normal thing in the world. Mark's world stopped. His mind screamed, his chest tightened, his knees nearly gave out, and in that moment didn't see his stepdaughter. He saw a woman who wanted him. He told her to go back to her room. He told her she didn't know what she was doing, that she was confused, young, reckless. But then, she looked at him with eyes that cut right through his guilt. "Is that what you really want?" she asked. "For me to walk away?" And the truth? That wasn't what he wanted. He wanted her, every single part of her. He had wanted her for months, and she knew it. She stepped forward, slow and fearless, like someone who had already made up her mind. She kissed him, and in that moment, everything disappeared. His marriage, the family, the memories, the morals, all gone. It was just her, and him, and that kiss. They didn't go any further that night. The sound of running water from the bathroom reminded Mark that Sarah could wake up any second. But that moment it shattered the last of his resistance. There was no going back. The next day, Emily confronted him again. Only this time, there was no seduction, no games, just boldness. "No more excuses, Mark. You and Mom aren't a couple. You know that. I'm grown now. I can live my life however I want, and I want you." He tried explaining how complicated it all was, that life didn't work like a teenage fantasy, that he had a son, that Sarah still slept in the next room, that people would talk, that it was wrong. She didn't care. "I've been ready to leave this house for months," she said, "and if you're ready, I'll go with you. We can do this together." Mark stared at her, speechless. It was insane, but for the first time in years, he felt something. Not guilt, not fear. Hope. Emily gave him courage he didn't think he had. That night, with Sarah fast asleep, Mark walked down the hallway and opened Emily's bedroom door. And what happened next would change everything. Mark stepped into Emily's room like a man walking into a storm, aware of the destruction that might follow, but too consumed by the thrill to turn back. The room was dim, quiet. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, waiting. Neither of them said a word. He closed the door behind him, and when their eyes met, they didn't need to say anything. The silence spoke for them. They crossed a line that night, a line that could never be uncrossed. And from that moment on, Mark knew his marriage was over. He wasn't just emotionally gone. Now it was physical, real, irreversible. He had to tell Sarah. He couldn't keep living under the same roof with this secret hanging over him. It was eating him alive. So the next morning, After barely sleeping a minute, Mark sat Sarah down in the kitchen. The coffee was still brewing when he said the words that shattered everything. "I need to tell you something, and you're going to hate me for it." She looked confused at first, then suspicious, then terrified. "What is it?" she asked. Mark's hands were shaking. "I'm leaving," he said. "I'm leaving you." Sarah blinked. "Why? What's going on?" There was no gentle way to say it, no kind phrasing, so he just told her the truth. "I'm in love with Emily." Time stopped. Sarah stared at him like she was staring at a stranger. Her face twisted. Her eyes welled up. Her voice cracked. "You're what?" Mark repeated it, slower, firmer. "I'm in love with her, and she loves me too." What came next was chaos. Sarah exploded. She screamed. She cried. She threw a mug at the wall, and then another at him. She lunged, hit him, scratched him. She broke down in a way Mark had never seen before. And honestly, he let her. He didn't fight back. He didn't defend himself. He deserved it. What crushed him more than her screams was the heartbreak in her eyes. They had built a life together, a family. 16 years of memories obliterated in a single confession. "I gave you everything," she sobbed. "You raised her like your own. And now this?" Mark stood there, absorbing every word, every insult, every ounce of rage. He didn't flinch. Because she was right. He had betrayed not just his wife, but a sacred trust, a bond that should have never been broken. But still, he felt something else beneath the guilt. Relief. He had finally said it out loud. The secret was out. Now came the hard part, facing the world. He packed his things that night. A few shirts, a toothbrush, his wallet. Emily was waiting outside. They didn't say much, just got in the car and drove to a cheap roadside motel. It was nothing special. A creaky bed, faded curtains, buzzing light bulbs. But to Mark, it felt like freedom, like a new beginning. They spent that night wrapped in each other's arms. He held her like he had never held anyone before, not even Sarah. It wasn't just lust, it was a twisted kind of love. The kind that feels too intense to be healthy, but too powerful to ignore. He felt alive. Emily laughed like she had no regrets. She kissed him like nothing else mattered. And for a moment, he believed it. Maybe they really could make this work. But something was off. Even in those early days, Mark could feel it. Emily was young too. Young, not just in age, but in spirit. Her mood changed fast. Her attention wandered. She was bold one moment, distant the next. Still, Mark ignored the signs. He told himself it was just the stress, the transition, the shock of everything that had happened. But then came the moment he never expected. Just 3 weeks after they moved in together, Emily sat him down. "I think we should stop this," she said. Mark blinked. "What are you talking about?" I'm over it." He froze. "You're over it?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I thought it would be exciting, but it's not what I imagined." It hit him like a freight train. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She wasn't torn apart by guilt or pain. She was just done. And Mark was destroyed. She had ruined everything. And now she was walking away like it was just some experiment, some joke. She moved back in with Sarah a few days later. And Sarah, being the mother she was, took her in. No questions asked. But the damage was done. Mark was left alone. Alone with his guilt. Alone with the memory of a love that was never real. Alone in a cheap motel room with nothing but silence and shame. And to make things worse, his son now hated him. The boy he raised wouldn't even look him in the eye, wouldn't speak to him, only came to visit because the court said he had to. Mark had lost everything. His wife, his children, his home. And for what? For a fantasy. Mark used to think rock bottom was just a phrase. But when you lose everything, your family, your home, your identity, and you're left sitting alone in a motel room, surrounded by the echoes of your own mistakes, you realize it's real. And it's deeper than you ever imagined. Days passed. Then weeks. He called Emily a few times. She didn't answer. He sent her messages. Nothing. Not even a read receipt. It was like she had vanished, like their time together had never even happened. But she was still out there back at Sarah's house, living her life, pretending nothing had ever happened. Mark was the one drowning, and nobody was throwing him a rope. The worst part? He still saw them. Every other weekend, when he picked up his son, he had to walk up to that same house, the one where he built his life, the one where everything fell apart. Sarah barely opened the door now. She handed his son over without a word, eyes cold, mouth shut. The boy didn't speak either. He just got in the car, headphones in, silence turned up. Mark tried to talk, tried to explain, but what could he say? I fell in love with your sister? How do you justify that? You don't. So he stopped trying. The silence became routine, and Mark started disappearing from his own life. He stopped shaving, stopped eating right, quit his job, moved from the motel to a tiny apartment above a liquor store. He didn't care anymore about anything. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every thought circled back to Emily. What she said, what she did, how easily she left. And then came the realization that crushed whatever was left of him. She never loved him. It was a game, a thrill, a teenage rebellion dressed up like romance. And Mark, he was the fool who believed it. He threw away 16 years of marriage, destroyed a woman's life, shattered a family. For what? For a girl who got bored after 3 weeks. Some nights he'd sit on the floor, bottle in hand, replaying everything in his mind. Her words, her eyes, that night in the motel when he thought he'd found real love. It all felt like a dream, no one he wished he could wake up from. But reality didn't offer mercy. One night, he found himself parked outside Sarah's house. Lights were on. He saw shadows moving through the windows. Laughter. Life. Without him. He watched from the car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. That's when Emily walked into view. She looked happy, free, like none of it had ever touched her. And that's when it hit him hardest. He had ruined his entire life for someone who had already moved on. A wave of shame slammed into him, hot, relentless. He felt his throat tighten, his eyes sting, his entire body shake. And he whispered the words he'd been avoiding for months. I'm a monster. But was he? Was he really a monster? Or just a man who made the worst decision of his life because he was starving for something that made him feel alive? He didn't know anymore. All he knew was that nothing would ever be the same. He tried therapy. Once. Saturday in the waiting room for 20 minutes and left before his name was called. What was the point? What would he even say? I ruined my family for a girl who never really loved me? The therapist couldn't fix that. No one could. So he lived in silence. He told no one the full story, just bits and pieces. Enough to survive, enough to get through another day. But inside, he was hollow, a ghost wearing his old face. And worst of all, he knew he deserved it. He deserved every cold glance from his son, every hateful message from Sarah, every night alone in that tiny, dark apartment. Because he had crossed a line. And now, he would live on the other side of it forever. Mark once thought regret was just a feeling. But regret, when it sinks in deep enough, becomes something else entirely. It becomes a companion, a shadow, a weight you carry into every room. And it never lets go. He stopped marking the days after a while. What was the point? They all looked the same, now gray, heavy, quiet. His apartment smelled like dust and takeout. The blinds were always shut, the lights dim. Sometimes, he forgot to speak out loud for days. There was no one to talk to anyway. No friends had stuck around. Even the ones who didn't know the whole story sensed the stench of scandal. People can feel shame from a mile away, and they run from it. Mark was radioactive. He thought maybe if he wrote it all down, he'd find some peace. So he started keeping a notebook, pages and pages of memories. The first time he held his son, the way Sarah used to laugh before life wore her down, Emily's drawings on the fridge, her spelling mistakes, her crooked little smile when she lost her first tooth. All gone. He wrote down how it all happened. The slow descent, the little decisions that didn't feel like much at the time, but led him here, alone, disconnected, unforgiven. And then he wrote one line in the center of a blank page. I ruined 5 lives for a 3-week illusion. He stared at it for hours. And that was the moment he realized something even worse than everything he'd already accepted. He didn't just lose the people he loved. He had taken something from them that could never be returned. Sarah, she'd never trust again. His son, he'd never look at a man the same way again. Emily, no matter how cold she had been, no matter how quick she walked away, he had stolen a piece of her future too. Confused it, complicated it, twisted it in ways she might not even understand yet. And himself? He wasn't even sure he existed anymore. Not in any meaningful way. He thought about reaching out to Sarah again, just once. Maybe to say he was sorry not to be forgiven, just to say it, to acknowledge what he did. But he couldn't. What would he even say? I'm sorry I loved your daughter? There's no way to make that sentence okay. No amount of therapy, redemption, or time could smooth out the horror of it. It was a stain on everything, permanent. One afternoon, months later, while picking up his son, something strange happened. The boy looked him in the eye. Just for a second. It wasn't forgiveness, not even close, but it was something. A flicker of recognition, a moment of human connection. Mark almost cried right there on the porch. But he held it in. He took his son to a diner. They ate in near silence. But it was peaceful, familiar. A memory almost returned. His son didn't smile, but he didn't put his headphones in either. When he dropped him off again, Mark turned to him. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for everything. The boy didn't say anything. He just nodded and went inside. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't a fix. But for a man who had burned everything to the ground, a single nod felt like a breeze in a world of smoke. That night, Mark opened his notebook and wrote, maybe regret is the price we pay for not dying with our secrets. He knew he'd never love again. Not in the way people mean when they say love. But maybe that was okay. Maybe this was what was left. Living with the truth. Owning it. Not running from it. He folded the notebook, put it in the drawer, and for the first time in a long time, he opened the blinds. Years passed. Mark never remarried, never dated, never really rebuilt anything. He existed, quietly, unseen. He got a job stocking shelves overnight at a 24-hour grocery store. It paid the bills. That was enough. He didn't tell people much. Let them assume what they wanted. The fewer questions, the better. He became the guy who always took the night shift. The guy who never called in sick. The guy no one really knew. And honestly, that suited him just fine. Once a month, he'd see his son. Their relationship never truly healed, but it didn't stay broken either. It became something new, fragile, distant, but real. Sometimes they talked about sports. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. It was okay. Sarah moved on. Mark heard she started dating again. She looked happier in the few glimpses he caught online photos of birthday parties, holiday dinners, her laughing with friends. He never dared like the posts. He didn't want her to know he was watching, but he was. Emily left town a year after everything happened, moved across the country, changed her number, went to college. Mark hasn't seen her since. Sometimes he thinks he catches a glimpse of her on a passing bus. Sometimes he dreams she's still 17, standing at the kitchen counter, asking why he and her mom were still together. Sometimes he wakes up crying. He keeps a picture of his kids on his nightstand. Not just his biological son, but also Emily, back when she was 6, wearing a Halloween costume, arms wrapped around his neck, smiling like he was her whole world. Before everything changed, he keeps it there to remind himself, this is what I lost. And maybe that's why he finally decided to record this story. Not to ask for forgiveness, not to explain himself, but to leave something behind. A warning. Because the truth is, it didn't start with a kiss. It started with silence, with little feelings that were ignored, with small boundaries that were crossed, with thoughts that should have been buried but were entertained instead. That's how destruction begins. Not like fire, but like smoke, creeping, slow, silent. Mark didn't wake up one day and decide to destroy his life. He just let himself drift, and drift, and drift, until one day, the man in the mirror wasn't someone he recognized anymore. And now, he's just trying to live with that man. The hardest part isn't the shame. It's not the isolation, not even the judgment from others. The hardest part is knowing he can never go back. There is no fixing what he did. There's only the long road forward alone. And for anyone listening, for anyone standing on the edge of a choice that feels dangerous or selfish or wrong, stop right now. Walk away. Say no. Burn the bridge before you ever cross it. Because once you do, once you choose what can't be undone, you might survive it, but you'll never be whole again. Mark learned that the hard way, and now he carries it like a scar across his soul. He ends the recording with one final thought. Courage made me take the first step, but it was weakness that made me keep going.